Hello, second graders. I will be reading Robin Hood, Chapter 6, How Robin Hood Met Will Scarlet. The youngster was clad in scarlet red, in scarlet fine and gay, and he did frisk it o'er the plain and chanted a roundelay. And we can see at the bottom, that little circle in the bottom right, a roundelay is a simple song with a line that repeats often. One fine morning, soon after the proud sheriff had been humbled, Robin Hood and Little John passed not far from the footbridge where they had fought their memorable battle, and directed their steps to the brook to quench their thirst. On each side of the dusty highway stretched out broad fields of tender young wheat. On the far side of the fields rose the sturdy oaks and beeches and ashes of the forest. So all the different kinds of trees. At their feet, violets peeped out shyly and greeted them with a fragrance that made their hearts glad. Once they reached the banks of the brook, the two friends lay flat on their backs amid some clover blossoms and gazed up at the clouds in silence. Presently they heard someone coming up the road, whistling gaily, whistling happily, as though he owned the whole world and it was made only to whistle in. "Here comes a cheery bird," said Robin, rising up on his elbow. "Let us lie still and hope that his purse is not as light as his heart." And so at the time, people would carry their money in a little bag, a little satchel, like a little purse. So they're hoping he has some money. So they lay still, and soon up came a stranger dressed in scarlet and silk and wearing a jaunty hat with a curling feather in it. Oh, jaunty is one of our vocabulary words. A jaunty hat. It's kind of a jolly hat. It's fun, whimsical. His whole costume was scarlet, from the feather to the silk hose on his legs. And we can see in the little graphic over to the left, hose are close-fitting leggings like stockings that attach to the waist, at the waist to a jacket. So kind of like some little pants or leggings. A good sword hung at his side, its scabbard all embossed, with tilting knights and weeping ladies. And embossed is another vocabulary word. It means stamped, imprinted, engraved. So, in other words, a very fancy scabbard, and we know a scabbard is a holder for a sword. His hair was long and yellow and hung in clusters about his shoulders. Little John clucked at this sight, but then added, "Not so bad a build for all his prettiness," he said. "Look, those legs are strong and straight. His arms hang from full shoulders. I promise you he can use his sword right well." In other words, Little John is saying, well, yeah, he looks kind of fancy, but he looks strong. "Nay," answered Robin, "he is nothing but a lady's man from court. I'll bet my longbow against a shilling that he would run at the sight of a quarterstaff. Stay behind this bush, and I will get some sport out of him. His silk purse may hold more pennies than the law allows to one man in Sherwood." So saying, Robin Hood stepped out and planted himself in the way of the scarlet stranger. The latter, seeing Robin, neither slowed nor quickened his pace, but sauntered straight ahead, looking to the right and left, but never once at Robin. "Stop," said the outlaw. "What do you mean by running over a wayfarer?" And a wayfarer is a traveler, a wanderer. So Robin's like, why are you about to push me over?" "Why should I stop, good fellow?" said the stranger in a smooth voice, looking at Robin for the first time. Because I ask you," replied Robin. "And who may you be?" asked the other coolly. "My name does not matter," said Robin, "but I am a public tax gatherer." Good one, Robin. "If your purse has more than a just number of shillings," that's some money, "I must lighten it some, for there are many worthy people around here who have less than the just amount. Therefore, kind sir, hand over your purse that I may judge its weight." So here Rob is pretending he's a public tax gatherer. Is that really his job? No. The scarlet stranger smiled sweetly, as though a lady were paying him a compliment. "Oh, your speech amuses me greatly," he said calmly. "Pray continue, if you are not done, for I am in no hurry this morning." "I have said all that is needed," retorted Robin, beginning to grow red. "Nonetheless, I have other arguments that may not be so pleasing to your dainty skin. Stand and deliver. I promise to deal fairly with your purse." Alas, said the stranger, with a little shrug of his shoulders, I am deeply sorry that I cannot show my purse to every rogue who asks to see it. But I really could not. I need every penny it contains. Pray stand aside. In other words, please move over. And here he calls Robin a rogue, and a rogue is a rascal, a scoundrel. Nay, I will not, and it will go harder with you if you do not yield at once. Good fellow, said the other gently, have I not listened to you with patience? Now that is all I promised to do. My conscience is clear, and I must go on my way. Hold, I say, said Robin hotly, for he knew Little John must be chuckling at this from behind the bushes. Or else I shall bloody those fair locks of yours. And he swung his quarterstaff threateningly. And you can see a picture of the quarterstaff there in the picture. It's like a big stick or a staff or a cudgel. Alas, moaned the stranger, shaking his head. Now I shall have to run this fellow through with my sword. And I had hoped to be a peaceable man from now on. And sighing deeply, he drew his shining blade. Put away your weapon, said Robin. 'Tis too pretty a piece of steel to get cracked with a common oak cudgel, and that is what would happen on the first pass I made at you. Get a stick like mine out of the undergrowth, and we will fight fairly man to man. The stranger thought a moment and eyed Robin from head to foot. Then he unbuckled his scabbard, laid it and the sword aside, and walked deliberately over to the oak thicket. Choosing from among the saplings, those are like baby trees, he found a stout little tree to his liking. He laid hold of it without stopping to cut it and gave it a tug. Up it came, root and all, as though it were a stalk of corn. And the stranger walked back, trimming it quietly, as if pulling up trees were the easiest thing in the world. From his hiding place, Little John saw the feat. By Our Lady, he muttered to himself. And remember, that means like, oh my goodness. I'm glad not to be in Master Robin's boots. Whatever Robin thought about seeing the stranger's strength, he did not utter a word nor budge an inch. Then back and forth the fighters swayed, their cudgels pounding, knocking off splinters and bark, and threatening to break bone, muscle, and skin. Back and forth they pranced, kicking up a cloud of dust and gasping for fresh air. 3 times Robin struck the Scarlet Man with blows that would have bowled over an ordinary man. Only twice did the Scarlet Man hit Robin, but the second blow was enough to finish him. The first had been delivered over the knuckles. Ooh, ouch. Got hit on the knuckles. And though it was a glancing stroke, it almost broke Robin's fingers. So he could not easily raise his staff again. And while he was dancing about in pain, the other staff came swinging through the dust cloud, zip, and struck him under the arm. Down went Robin as though he were a bowling pin. Ooh, simile. Flat down into the dust of the road. But despite the pain, he was getting up again to fight on when Little John interfered. Hold, said he, bursting out of the bushes and seizing the stranger's weapons. Hold, I say. Oh, and I'm inferring hold means stop. I would not strike him while he was down, answered the stranger quietly. But if there is a nest of you hatching here, cluck out the other chicks and I'll fight them all. Ooh, he's referring to the other guys as little chicks. In other words, bark, bark. Now for all the deer in Sherwood, cried Robin. I'll fight you no more, for I feel truly sore in wrist and body, nor shall any of mine molest you. In fact, Robin did not look good. His clothes were coated with dirt, one of his hose had slipped halfway down from his knee, the sleeve of his jerkin was split, and his face was streaked with sweat and dirt. Little John eyed him with amusement. Now, good master, said he, the sport you kicked up has left you in a sorry state. Let me dust your coat for you. It has been dusted enough already, replied Robin, and I now believe the scripture saying that all men are made of dust, for it has sifted me through and lined my throat an inch deep. And he went to the brook, drank deeply, and washed his face and hands. All this time the stranger had been eyeing Robin attentively and listening to his voice, as though striving to recall it. If I'm not mistaken, he said at last, you are the famous outlaw Robin Hood. You are right, replied Robin, but my fame has tumbled sadly about in the dust today. Now why did I not know you at once? Continued the stranger. This battle did not need to happen, for I came to find you today, and thought I could remember your face and voice. Do you not know me, Rob? Have you ever been to Gamewell Lodge? Will Gamewell, my dear cousin Will Gamewell, shouted Robin, throwing his arms about Will with affection. What a clod I was not to recognize you! But it has been years since we parted, and your schooling has polished you up greatly. Will embraced his cousin no less happily. We are equal on not knowing our relatives, he said, for you have changed and strengthened much from the boy I used to run races with in old Sherwood. But why do you seek me? Asked Robin. You know that I am an outlaw in dangerous company. How is my uncle? And have you heard of Maid Marian lately? Your last question first, answered Will, laughing. I saw Maid Marian not long after the great shooting match at Nottingham, when you won her the golden arrow. She prizes it among her dearest possessions, though it made her an enemy of the sheriff's proud daughter. Maid Marian asked me to tell you, if I ever saw you, that she must return to Queen Eleanor's court, but she can never forget the happy days in Sherwood. As for the old squire, he is strong and hearty. He speaks of you as a sad young dog, but is secretly proud of your skill with the bow and the way you are pestering the sheriff. 'Twas for my father's sake that I am now an outlaw like yourself. He had a steward, a surly fellow. A steward is kind of like a helper, someone who works for you. He had a steward, a surly fellow, who, while I was away at school, bootlicked his way into favor until he lorded it over the whole house. Then he grew right saucy and defiant, but my father ignored it. He thought the fellow indispensable in managing the estate. So he thought the fellow was very important, necessary. That's what indispensable means. When I came back, it irked me to see the fellow strut about as though he owned the place. He was sly enough with me at first and would browbeat the squire only while I was out of earshot. In other words, he would say bad things about him, only when Will was not there. It happened one day, however, that I heard loud voices through an open window and paused to listen. That wicked servant called my father a meddling old fool. You are a fool and a meddler yourself, I shouted, springing through the window. Take that for your impudence. Oh, and we know impudence means rudeness, disrespect, insolence. All right, take that for your impudence, and I struck him a heavier blow than I intended. In other words, I hit him harder than I wanted to, for I have some strength in mine arm. The fellow rolled over and never breathed again. I think I broke his neck. I knew that the sheriff would use this as a reason to hound my father if I stayed, so I told him I would seek you in Sherwood. So Will is deciding to leave, and he's thinking if he leaves and just goes to the woods, it will be better for his father. For a man escaping the law, you took it about as coolly as one could wish, said Robin Hood. To see you come along decked out in all your plumage. And plumage is like feather, like a bird has plumage. So he's kind of joking at how fancy he looked. One would think you had not a care in all the world. Indeed, I remarked to Little John here that I hoped your purse was not as light as your heart. Perhaps you meant head, laughed Will. And is this Little John? Shake hands with me if you will, and promise to cross a staff with me in friendly bout some day. That will I, said Little John heartily. Here's my hand on it. What is your last name again? 'Tis to be changed, interjected Robin, to confuse the men looking for him. Ah, I have it. In scarlet he came to us, and that shall be his name. Welcome to Sherwood, Will Scarlet. So he's changed his name from Will Gamewell to Will Scarlet. So remember that Little John used to be John Little, and they just switched it around. I welcome Will Scarlet, said Little John, and they all clasped hands again and swore to be true to each other.